In a move that has sent shockwaves through the global automotive industry, Japan is making the extraordinary decision to pull its automotive giants, Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, out of the US market. This is not just a business maneuver, it's a seismic shift that few could have predicted, and it's already being called one of the most significant events in the history of international trade. For decades, Japanese cars have been a staple on American roads, known for their reliability, innovation, and affordability. Now, that era is coming to an abrupt and dramatic end. The announcement made on the symbolic date of the 4th of July was a direct response to President Trump's increasingly aggressive trade threats and the imposition of steep tariffs on imported vehicles and parts. The timing was no accident. It was a clear message to both American policymakers and the world that Japan would not be strong-armed into unfavorable deals. The news dominated headlines, overshadowing even the holiday celebrations, as industry experts and political analysts scrambled to assess the fallout. After months of tense and ultimately fruitless negotiations, Japanese leaders concluded that the US market had become too volatile and unpredictable to justify continued investment. Behind closed doors, government officials and top executives weighed the risks, ultimately deciding that protecting their company's long-term interests meant making the painful choice to withdraw. The decision was not made lightly, but it reflects deep concerns about the future of US-Japan economic relations. The impact on the ground in America is immediate and devastating. Auto dealerships that once thrived on Japanese brands now face existential threats, with showrooms sitting empty and employees fearing for their livelihoods. The ripple effects are being felt in every corner of the industry. Supply chains, which have been carefully built over decades, are suddenly in crisis. Ports are clogged with unsold inventory, factories are halting production, and warehouses are filled with parts that may never be used. The disruption is unprecedented, and experts warn that it could take years to fully recover. Millions of jobs, both in the US and abroad, are now at risk. From assembly line workers to logistics managers, the livelihoods of countless families hang in the balance. The economic shockwaves are spreading far beyond the auto sector, threatening to trigger a broader recession. For American consumers, the consequences are equally stark. With Japanese automakers gone, car buyers will face fewer choices, longer wait times, and significantly higher prices. The days of affordable, high-quality Japanese vehicles are over, at least for the foreseeable future. Japan's withdrawal is more than just a business decision. It's a bold stand against what it perceives as coercive and unfair US trade tactics. This move fundamentally alters the balance of power in the global auto industry and sends a clear signal to other nations about the risks of economic confrontation with Japan. The US-Japan alliance, which has been a cornerstone of Asia-Pacific stability and economic growth for 70 years, is now deeply fractured. The trust and cooperation that once defined this partnership have been replaced by uncertainty and suspicion. As the world watches this unprecedented act of economic defiance unfold, there is a sense of profound uncertainty. How will the US respond? Can the rift be healed, or is this the beginning of a new era of global economic rivalry? One thing is certain: the consequences of Japan's exit will be felt for years to come, reshaping the future of the auto industry and international relations alike. The crisis began when President Trump, in a move that stunned both domestic and international audiences, threatened to impose massive tariffs, some as high as 70%, on a wide range of imports. This wasn't just a shot across the bow of America's rivals. It was a sweeping challenge to allies and adversaries alike, signaling a dramatic escalation in the ongoing trade wars. The announcement sent shockwaves through global markets, as businesses and governments scrambled to assess the potential fallout. For many, it was a clear message: the era of predictable trade relations was over, replaced by a new, more volatile reality. Official letters, stamped with the authority of the White House, were dispatched to capitals from Tokyo to Berlin. These communications laid out stark terms: accept the new US trade conditions or face crippling tariffs by July 9th. The ultimatum left little room for negotiation, putting immense pressure on foreign governments to make quick, difficult decisions. Behind closed doors, diplomats and trade officials worked frantically, weighing the costs of compliance against the risks of defiance. The world reacted with alarm and uncertainty. Some countries, like Vietnam, reluctantly accepted the steep tariffs, hoping to preserve access to the lucrative American market. But most major trading partners, including economic powerhouses in Europe and Asia, pushed back forcefully. Leaders convened emergency meetings, and financial markets experienced wild swings as investors tried to predict the next move in this high-stakes game. Even before the tariffs took effect, the mere threat of such sweeping measures sent ripples through global supply chains. Exports to the US began to drop as companies hesitated to ship goods that might soon be subject to punishing duties. Air cargo routes slowed to a crawl, and logistics centers reported growing backlogs and uncertainty. The world's interconnected trade networks, built over decades, suddenly seemed fragile and exposed. Trump's aggressive strategy forced countries to the negotiating table, creating an atmosphere of tension and urgency at high-level summits. While some saw this as a bold move to protect American interests, others warned that the approach risked catastrophic backlash, potentially unraveling decades of economic cooperation and trust. Inside the White House, administration officials bet that the sheer economic might of the US would compel nations to bend under pressure. They believed that, faced with the prospect of losing access to the world's largest consumer market, most countries would have no choice but to accept America's terms. But Japan's dramatic exit from negotiations proved there are limits to this strategy. For some countries, the cost of capitulation was simply too high. Rather than play by US rules, they chose to walk away, signaling a willingness to endure short-term pain for long-term independence. In the end, the gamble appears to have backfired. Instead of securing quick victories, the aggressive tariff threats have shaken the very foundations of global trade, leaving markets rattled, alliances strained, and the future of international commerce more uncertain than ever before. US-Japan trade talks, once friendly, devolved into a tense standoff as Trump's July 9th deadline approached. The core dispute, US demands for open Japanese markets in autos and rice, issues deeply tied to Japan's identity and politics. Japan refused to make concessions that would devastate its industries, leading to deadlock. The White House's hardline approach exposed the limits of economic pressure. Accusations of inflexibility and bullying eroded trust on both sides. The talks collapsed under the weight of weeks of frustration and clashing priorities. The gap was simply too wide to bridge, setting the stage for a historic rupture. Trump's central demand: a 25% tariff on Japanese autos, unless Japan opened its market to US cars. For Japan, rice is sacred, both a cultural symbol and a political powerhouse. So opening its market was unthinkable. Japan offered billions in US energy and defense purchases, even support for American shipbuilding. But Trump rejected these as distractions. The president insisted on rebalancing auto trade and opening the rice market. No compromise. Japan's creative offers were dismissed, and the focus on these two sectors made a deal impossible. The rigid standoff over cars and rice pushed negotiations past the point of no return. The alliance broke on the rocks of national pride and political immovability. News of Japan's withdrawal sent shockwaves through global markets. Stocks in Tokyo, New York, and London plunged. The Dow saw its sharpest drop of the year. The hope for compromise vanished, replaced by fear of a full-blown trade war. Supply chains, already strained, now face catastrophic breakdowns as Japanese automakers exit. American businesses scramble to adapt, with long-term planning thrown into chaos. Small businesses, from dealerships to repair shops, face existential threats. The market's reaction signals a loss of faith in global trade stability. Trump's aggressive tariffs and Japan's response have shattered decades of predictability. The world has entered a new era of economic nationalism and uncertainty. The collapse of the Japan trade deal stands out as the most dramatic and public failure in President Trump's ambitious campaign to rewrite the rules of global commerce. But it is far from the only setback. Across the world, the administration's push for new, more favorable trade agreements has faced significant resistance and repeated disappointments, revealing the complex realities of international negotiation. Despite aggressive efforts and high-profile promises, the administration has managed to secure only a handful of new deals. Most negotiations with major trading partners have stalled or broken down entirely, leaving empty conference rooms and unfinished agreements. The vision of a new era of American-led trade has proven much harder to realize than anticipated. Key allies such as the European Union, Canada, and India have pushed back strongly against US demands, especially the threat of high tariffs. These countries are determined to protect their own industries and workers, refusing to bow to pressure that could harm their economies. Instead of quick wins, the US has encountered a wall of resistance from partners who are just as determined to defend their interests. The administration's heavy reliance on tariffs as a negotiating tool has led to prolonged, often bitter talks. Rather than fostering cooperation, these tactics have fueled mistrust and hardened positions on both sides. Negotiators find themselves locked in heated debates, with little progress to show for months of effort. The fallout from the failed Japan deal only complicates matters further. Other nations, watching closely, may now be even more reluctant to make concessions or trust US intentions. The sense that the US could walk away from the table at any moment makes future negotiations even more challenging. As a result, the administration's leverage on the world stage has been weakened. With trust eroding and relationships strained, the path to new trade agreements is steeper than ever. Each failed negotiation makes the next one harder to start, let alone finish. Successful international trade diplomacy requires more than just economic threats and tough talk. It demands patience, trust, and a willingness to compromise, qualities that are in short supply amid ongoing disputes. Without these, even the most determined efforts can falter. Now, as the US seeks to forge new alliances and secure better deals, the struggle is more daunting than ever. The world is watching, and the outcome will shape the future of global trade for years to come. As the US battles Japan, China watches carefully from the sidelines. Recent US moves to ease restrictions on Beijing haven't erased Chinese caution. China fears new US trade deals in Asia are designed to isolate it, shifting supply chains away from Chinese factories. Beijing monitors the fallout, ready to exploit any rift between the US and its allies. The US-Japan split could open doors for China to strengthen ties with Japan and others questioning American reliability. The failed talks reshape Asia's balance of power, with China poised to benefit. The global trade crisis is now a high-stakes geopolitical chess match. Analysts say Japan misread Trump's priorities, offering billions in energy and defense deals, hoping to avoid the sensitive issues of cars and rice. These offers, though substantial, failed to address Trump's core grievances. Japan's strategy, concede where possible, protect sacred industries, backfired. Trump saw the offers as distractions, not solutions. The US also miscalculated, believing economic pain would force Japan to yield. Both sides underestimated each other's red lines and political realities. The result, a perfect storm of mutual misunderstanding and strategic error. The rupture was inevitable, even if neither side truly wanted it. With Japan's exit, the future of global trade hangs in the balance. Trump's tariff deadline looms, and the world teeters on the edge of a trade war. The collapse with Japan shows even the strongest alliances can fail. Optimism for a last-minute solution is fading fast. Japan's move is no bluff. The risk of a global trade breakdown is higher than in generations. The world watches to see if Washington will reassess or double down. The era of free trade and cooperation is under siege. The coming months will decide if the world can recover, or if a new age of economic nationalism is here to stay.